that glimmered like scales, like light on the river on a grand summer day. Cleo had barely known Joanna, but their stories had intertwined, theirs and those of the young men who came to Cumberland that season. 2 of them had drowned, and the rest had scattered to the 4 corners, but to Cleo, the end to Joanna felt like the end to all. In the wake of that news, Cleo left Kingdom Come. Situated with water on all sides, it had never been more than a lick of land with the river bounding the east shore and the sea to the west, a temporary realm that would one day be joined with the greater 17-mile Cumberland Island. She could walk around the entire thing in 30 minutes, and she'd been measuring out her remaining days before it was an island no more. For the last few seasons, the silt that rose from the riverbed with every tide meant she'd had to navigate more carefully through the waterways so she wouldn't mire her boat or drag the hull over a sandbar. She knew that locals liked to lay bets on how much longer her cottage would stand against the shifting foundation, and on the day Cleo Woodbine would come walking back into town. Farther east and north of Cumberland lay the mainland and revelry, a sleepy little fishing community known for its own long history and picturesque Main Street, where she'd been born. On a clear night, she might see the lights twinkle there like a few more stars from the sky, miles up the coast, still a quiet little place in 1959. That was as much as she'd cared to see of the larger world in a long while. Taking her usual route, Cleo meandered south to moor her boat near Dungeness, the largest of the old Carnegie mansions, before she'd turn around and head north to pass the other summer homes still standing their ground against the passage of time: Grayfield, Stafford, Plum Orchard. She liked that they had names like Grand Old Gals and often felt she could almost count herself among them. A few still housed family, either visiting or living there for parts of the year. Others were completely abandoned. But after a century, the Carnegie's strange kingdom by the sea was going to seed, crumbling beautifully, like everything eventually did on Cumberland. Cleo herself was a small, strong, practical woman. Not yet 50, she was most comfortable wearing a pair of denim pants with plenty of pockets, a cotton button-down worn soft, and muddy Red Wing boots. Her auburn hair was a thicket, snipped at with kitchen scissors to keep it chin length. She was not stylish or modern or relevant in any way. She had made a life that was far from sensible as an artist and a forger. No one would miss her, she supposed, aside from the heirloom fruit trees and shrubs scattered between the estates, from which she gathered produce in order to barter for necessities. On the whole, Cleo lived her days out the same as those trees. She answered to no one, and she honestly preferred it that way. It had been a good year for muscadine and loquat and the ruby sweet, a favorite of hers. She took a plum from her pocket, had her breakfast, breathed out, then turned her face to the sun. It was the summer light that always got to her, made her hate to think of leaving this place. She'd learned you could love your prison. You could make a sanctuary of it. Long before she took up as artist-in-residence at Woodbine Cottage, her grandfather had been the first to hold the post. The Carnegies of Plum Orchard had been his benefactors, those old gods with their wild fortune, now dwindling away. Dooley Woodbine was a first-generation Scotch-Irish immigrant whose family had settled in Kentucky. There, he'd been a childhood friend of Marius Johnston, who later married Nancy Carnegie. When he'd invited Dooley to Georgia, Dooley brought his own wife, a practical girl from Brunswick, and his favorite Scotch-Irish folk tales and fables in his red head, like some people bring relatives who cling and settle too close. And while living in the cottage, he'd fathered one son, Cleo's father, and written and illustrated